Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. I am Liviu and today we are going to do something pretty special, and that's building up an ImpulseRC frame with a lot of goodies on it. But before I go into the build process, let's open up the package I received from ImpulseRC. But what I want to point out is that the frame I received may not be in the final packaging, so keep that in mind. What do we have here? I already opened it to look at it because I was pretty curious to see, but I kept everything in their bags. As I told you before, this will not be the final packaging. I have one bag here with straps, arms, plates, and basically all the carbon related bits are in this bag. I have another bag here which has a lot of interesting goodies in it, and we can already see something pretty cool inside there. Let me just take it out. This is the new WOLF PDB version 3, which has the new awesome graphical OSD from ImpulseRC, the one made specifically for the APEX frame. But this one is the WOLF PDB that you can use on pretty much every frame out there on the market, but also on the APEX if you are using single ESCs like I do. So this is a very good addition to the ImpulseRC electronics lineup. And here we have the protection stuff. Impulse sent me all three colors you will be able to buy right now. It's the black ones, this brownish steel color, and the red. These are made by HQ Prop. They are molded plastics, so pretty tough and durable, which is very good. And also for the ones that use 4-in-1 ESCs, these are some very cool wire protections for protecting the wires from prop strikes. Also, these are molded plastics, so again pretty tough and durable. And now let's take out all these pieces, but first I am going to take out the carbon pieces. So, straps. These are the main parts of the APEX body, and because a lot of you have asked about sizes, let's measure the arms, which are 6 mm thick. The top plate is 2 mm. The bottom plates are 2.5 mm. Actually, the front one is 2.5 and the back one is 2 mm. The camera plates, 2 mm. And also we have the standoffs for different things to do with them. I will put the carbon parts aside and take the goodies bag. As always, in every ImpulseRC frame package you will find two files. We have a battery pad which is silicone. It's no more foam, and that's pretty durable and actually pretty sticky. I like that. We have all the screws and washers and all of that. We have here the soft mounts for the flight controller, depending. I am using these usually on the KISS V2, all of my frames, because usually in hard crashes the plastic standoffs break off, and that's a pain, especially when you are in a field. And these ones kind of help out in eliminating some of the vibrations, but not all of them. We have here a pretty interesting part which you can use to mount your antenna, and also you have some slots there for zip tying the power connection lead or something like that. I am not using this actually because I chose to use a different mounting solution for the VTX antenna. But if you like to use normal antennas connecting with an NSMA, this one is perfect for screwing here your pigtail. Foam edge Mr. Steel style I'm not a fan of, but if you like this, go for it. Of course, we have an XT60 pigtail, and this is the new ImpulseRC WOLF PDB version 3. No more Max IC for OSD. This is a graphical OSD. Everything is done with software, and as a comparison, the difference is significant. I mean, this is the WOLF PDB V2 or V1 size, and this is the V3. Now the V3 you could mount on almost any frame out there, so that's a plus. But the main thing is that it goes perfectly on the Apex frame and has a graphical OSD on it. I am putting everything aside. Okay guys, so now let's talk about what hardware I will use on this build. It will be a 6S build, so we have TBS Ethix 6S new stout motor, which I am very curious to fly. KISS V2, single ESCs from Flyduino. These are KISS 25 amp ESCs. Some caps to put on them because I will be using them on 6S and they are quite at the limit on 6S. These caps are 470 microfarads. I didn't had 220 like I normally use. 35 volt, low ESR. These are Rubicon caps. Unify HV. I have a mount which is not made for Apex, so I will have to make some mods to stick it in. Lolipop antenna. And of course the Foxeer Predator, my choice for FPV cameras. So these are basically the electronics and gear that I will be installing on the Apex frame. Of course I will get rid of them and start building up the frame. A few things that I want to say before I will start building the frame is that this way is my way. If you want to follow it, go right ahead, but of course everybody can decide how they want to approach the build process. For the screws, I have a special way of doing it. I take a bin and I will just throw everything on that bin like this, so that everything can be easy to see. Okay guys, so first we are going to build up the frame. We are going to touch first only the front bottom plate and the arms. And to start that, we will choose the screws for mounting the arms. As you can see, one is longer and has thread only on the end, and the other one is shorter and has thread all the way. We will take the shorter ones and also the aluminum washers. We put the screw inside. We take the front bottom plate and sticking the screw like this. We take the arm. Be sure to have this hole facing up. And as you can see, the arm has two holes, and we are going to screw the middle one, which has a lock nut, screwing it in, not all the way. I did this for one arm, and now I'm going to do the same for the rest. I don't know if I said it or not, but the arms are symmetrical, so that means that they will fit front to back, left to right with no issues. And now comes the bow tie. As you can see here, we have an open space between the front arms and the back arms, and this bow tie goes into this place here, just pressing it in to fit snugly. And now we have the four arms interlocking into one piece that can relieve the stress in crashes. Next thing we are going to do is take the bottom back plate, and as you can see, this one has press nuts that corresponds to the 4 holes remaining on the arms. But before that, we will need to install some screws that are going to help us mount the flight controller stack. We have 2 mounting options, 20 by 20 or 30 by 30. Because I'm going to use the KISS V2, I will use the 30 by 30, and also I will not use a 4-in-1 ESC, so my stack will be quite low. For that reason, I'm going to choose the screws which are the shortest, these ones. And if you will look closely on the bottom side of the bottom plate, we have these sunk screws here, and we put it like this. We have also some lock nuts. We take that, screw it in. Now we have the 4 screws that will help us mount the FC. Now it's time to press the other screws, which are longer, and for that I will press them through the holes. They will need a little bit of juggling because they are a very snug fit. And now I will take the bottom and I will start screwing things in. Tight, but not too tight. We don't want to kill the screws or threads. They have thread lock on them from the factory, so that will be helpful for them not to unscrew. We finished building up the base frame for the Apex. Next thing I'm going to do is just install the spacers or the standoffs for the front, taking some screws from the package. I chose the medium sizes because the front bottom plate is 2.5 millimeters and I like more meat to grab on the standoff. So the front 4 standoffs in the camera section are mounted. Now we are going to mount the back standoffs, but I want to talk about these back standoffs. For example, we have 4 that have the same size, like this. But we also have 2 that are shorter, and those are for using this little contraption which can be used to mount the SMA pigtail here, and also for some zip tying options for the power lead or something like that. Taking now the shorter screws, I will not tighten the screws all the way right now because who knows, maybe we need to change something along the build process. I just realized I did a mistake. I forgot the front bumper, which I'm going to take now from the bag. I'm going to use the red ones because my antenna mount is also red. So, unity. I will have to take out the front standoffs. Sometimes you just forget stuff. This is the front bumper. It goes here like this. And we will need some longer screws now, because the bumper will eat up the length. This bumper is pretty nice. No more TPU mount stuff. This will take a beating for sure. So that mistake is out of the way. I will do another thing before switching over to electronics, taking the rubber standoffs and screw them on here. These are for mounting the fly controller. And that's it, we are finished. I will switch over to the electronics and show you there what I do first. This is what I am doing before mounting any of the electronics on the board. I am pre-thinning all the pads that I will use, because it's more easy if the pads have already solder with a little bit of flux on the pads. And when you will touch up the wires, everything will go fast and smooth when you have everything installed on the frame. For this I will take my soldering iron, solder on the pads that you will use thicker wire, place some more solder on the pads like this. As you can see, there is enough solder there to solder a thicker wire. Of course you can add more later. On the signal pads I am not going to use too much solder because the wires are thin. A good solder means that it has a good flux, or better said, the flux in it is of a better quality. This is the main power connection, and here I will want to place more solder because the main battery connection has way thicker wire than all the rest, and that's why I will use more solder on that pad. I am rotating the board so that it's easier for me. Here are all the camera and VTX connections, all on this line. So I'm going to pre-thin all the pads here. Everything looks healthy. I am turning the board as I work to be easier for me. I am working on 300C right now with a chisel type tip on my soldering iron. Don't use thin tips because they don't hold up the heat that well, and it's a pain to work with. So finished with the PDB. I'm going now to the FC. On the FC, the only things that we need to pre-thin are the receiver connections, which are these ones here. And the big one here is for the telemetry. Because we will connect the FC to the PDB only through these connectors here, so no more soldering done here. Next are the ESCs. We have the motor connections, power connections, signal, and the other connection for power, which is the ground, I guess, and do the same thing for all 4 ESCs. So now I switched back to working on the frame itself. If you noticed, I decided to change this standoff to a smaller one, and I will show you later why. And I also pressed down the TPU antenna mount onto the standoffs. Next, I am going to take the double-sided sticky tape and I'm just gonna stick it down here. Remove the protection from the sticky tape, watching out for the arrow and placing it on the carbon itself, pressing and wiggle it a bit just to be sure it is down all right. Placing the ESCs onto the arms, deciding exactly where to place it. I have to take into the consideration the fact that I will install a cap here like this, and when I decided where to place my ESC, I will take some electrical tape and stick it down in that position. And this is because I need to measure my cables to connect all 4 ESCs. For that I will need some silicone cable. This is 18 gauge. Taking my cable, roughly align it and cut it. I am going to cut 4 wires, same length. So now I have 4 of each. I stripped the wires. I don't know if you can see it. A little bit less stripping on the ESC side, and on the other side a little bit more. Next, I will just thin the wires like I did with the pads. Generous amount of solder. On both ends. I will recommend to use a tweezer, or if not a tweezer, your hand, like this. But be careful that if you hold it like this with your hand, the wire will get pretty hot. And I will just start soldering the wires to the pads. And now we have a solid connection between the ESC and the PDB. And now doing the same thing on the other pads. So now if we finished soldering the power connections to the ESC, now we need to measure, cut, strip, pre-tin and solder the signal wires and the ground wire. And now cut a bunch of these cables. I have 12 stripped and tinned wires like this one. And what I need to do is just solder one after the other. One ESC done. Now I need to do all the others. Okay guys, so this is how it looks, all connected. Each ESC has now power and signals, bending the caps legs. Measuring the position where to cut, thinning the legs a bit, place the cap in position and just gently tap it on the connection. After that, with fresh solder, go in and firmly solder the caps legs on the power connections. It's very important that the cap should be soldered on the ESC pads and not on the PDB pads, because the most noise created on the system is generated here at the ESC. So right now we have our caps installed, and because we don't want those caps to move around, we should find a way to hold them down by any means. I just chose some heat shrink that I will put over the caps. And this should keep in line the wires and the caps all together, so that the caps cannot move up and down in a crash or something. Taking the hot air gun, not that heavy temperature. Now we have our caps here, a little bit held down by this heat shrink, and that's it. Because the motor is quite close to the ESC, it would not be possible for me to use a longer heat shrink and solder the wires and after that pull the heat shrink, because I don't have any more space here because of the caps. Because of this, I will use two pieces of heat shrink. First piece, which will sit kind of here, I will cut 4 pieces, put them on the ESCs. Same thing goes with the other ones. And now we have our ESCs more than half protected. And when it comes to soldering the motor leads, we will only use a little piece of heat shrink. Okay, so I have cut down some heat shrink. And now I can solder here, and after that pull it over the motor wires and everything should be okay. Okay guys, so next we are taking the motors, which in our case is the Mr. Steel Stout motors. Okay guys, so before I go forward, I want to solder my ST60 connector with cables, and I want to measure how I will mount it here. And it will be something like this, pretty short. I will thin the wires. Okay, I personally like to keep my XT60s in front, but that's just me. And if you look closely here, you will see that there is a notch in the carbon, also one here, and that's for a zip tie to grab the power cables and provide stress relief, not to pull on the PDB. So before we are going forward, we should try and test if this is working right now. So for that, I will take my power supply leads. I will connect them positive to negative. I will set my power supply to the required voltage, which this quad will run to, and that's 6S, and for now 3 amps. Let's see if everything up until now is working, and if everything is working, we are going further with this build. So everything looks to be in order. The next thing I am going to do is install the FPV camera, measure the wires for it, solder them on the PDB. After that, I will go to the VTX, install the VTX. After the VTX is finished, I will go on to the receiver and KISS FC, and after that we will close everything up, power it, and see if it works or not. We will need to take the camera plates, the camera, screws for mounting it, if I'm not losing them. Of course, these screws should be tightened at the end when you want to change your camera up tilt. We will take the frame, place the camera plates with the camera inside. Some wiggling of the standoffs is needed because they have to be in a certain position for everything to fit nicely. And these are our cables. I will take them and press them in like this. And as you can see, here are the camera connections, and I will cut the wires there. Strip every wire. Obviously, thin those little wires. We now have one ground, and that's the middle one here. So that is a shared ground for VTX and camera. We have in, which is input for the video from the FPV camera. We have one 5V, which is power for the FPV camera. And we have the control signal so that we can enter the FPV camera setting menu. Try and wiggle the cables around for them to sit nicely. And that's it for the camera setup. Next, I am going to take my Unify. I will need to take out this 5V output cable because I don't need it. And to do that, I will just take the pin out of the connector like that. I have here 2 grounds. I only need one, so I will cut one. And now we have power, ground, video and smart audio. I will place the connector back inside. Here is the place where I like to mount VTXs, in the back. I know some of you like to mount it on the top plate, but this is where I like to mount my receiver and VTX, in the back. Right now I need to route these cables and look for a way to route them not too tight. I guess this length is okay. Thinning the wires. It's important to use fresh solder on them because the solder has flux in it. I will not solder them now because we need to heat shrink this and insert the cable from the antenna. So it clicked into place. Let me find some heat shrink. Is this going to work? Yeah, it should be a transparent one, but unfortunately I don't have one anymore. I kind of use them all. Now I will take some double-sided tape, stick it here, twisting the cable and push it back, and that's our VTX mounted. We should see if we can insert the connector inside. Now we have the green one, which is smart audio. We have the black one, which is the same ground common with the camera, so we have to be fast when soldering it, not to mess up the one we previously soldered. We have the power, which goes here to 7.5 volt output from the PDB. We have the video output, and we have the smart audio. We arrange the cables. I will take the cable that connects the PDB to the FC and try and see if everything fits nicely here. So it does. We finished with the VTX. I installed this cable. Next thing I'm gonna do is take the fly controller, plug the cables. Be very careful when you plug these cables because you really need to plug them where they should be. The white one is going to be connected to serial 1, and the black one goes to PDB connector on the KISS FC, just like that. And now I'm going to watch out for the arrow, bend the cable in such a way that stays completely under the FC, like that. Take some plastic nuts, screw them in. Just to be sure that everything was tightened, I will tighten them up. So now we have our fly controller. Next thing is solder the connections for the Crossfire receiver. It's a Nano Crossfire receiver. And this Nano Crossfire receiver I want to install here on top of the VTX, like so. I need to pass these wires under the fly controller. and solder them on their place. We have the black one, which is ground. We have the red one, which is the power connection, 5 volt for the Crossfire receiver. We have the white one, which is the signal. And this one is the telemetry, or TX, RX, however you want to call them. So this is the receiver connection for the KISS FC. I will take a double-sided tape and place it here on the receiver. Take the sticky part protection off and stick it on top of the VTX like this. And I will take a zip tie, pass it through here, coming back on the other side. Again, this zip tie is not supposed to be very tight, so it's not too tight, but it's tight enough so that it holds everything together. So now we almost have everything done, except that I need to pass one zip tie through here. So now I have my XT60 hold up on this zip tie, which is pretty neat. And now what should we do with this normal antenna from the Crossfire? And I will show you in just a second. They are tubes held by this piece between the smaller standoff and the top plate. I will just pass the antenna cable through the tube. I know everybody is using Immortals. They are very tough and durable, but I like vertical polarization on my quads, and this is the reason I'm using this type of contraption for installing my antennas. I have on all my quads this type of antenna mounting. Let's close this thing up and see how it looks. I am taking the top plate, wiggle it a bit. Now we will need short screws and one pretty long one. I will start with this long one here. And that's my first screw. And now let's put the other screws in. I'm sorry about this camera focusing so much. Now I'm just tightening all the screws down on every side. What I will need to do now is just use a piece of broken prop or something to put here and wrap it in electrical tape to protect the ESC from prop strikes and set up everything. I know it was a very long video. I hope I didn't bore everybody. This was the build video for the Apex. Thank you very much for putting up with me with all my English mistakes. For all of you who want to support me on Patreon, I will leave into the description area my Patreon link account. And also a big thanks to ImpulseRC, Flyduino and TBS for helping me out with this. Thank you again very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye.